What's up, guys? Welcome to Sleepy Cinephile. Tonight we're stepping into the gritty world of the Shawshank Redemption. Picture this, it's 1947, and the air feels heavy with the weight of justice or injustice. You're standing outside Shawshank Prison, a gray fortress of stone that looms like a bad dream. The gates creak open, and you're right there with Andy Dufresne, a man whose life just took a brutal turn. This isn't just a story, it's a journey through hope, grit, and the kind of quiet strength that breaks walls. So, before you kick back, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Drop a comment with your city and what time it is where you are. I'm curious who's out there tonight. Now, settle in, maybe crack a window for that cool night air, and let's dive into this story together. You're walking beside Andy Dufresne, a banker with sharp eyes and a calm that feels almost out of place. The year is 1947, and the world outside is buzzing with post-war dreams. But here it's just you, Andy, and the cold reality of a life sentence. He's been convicted of murdering his wife and her lover, a crime he swears he didn't commit. You can smell the damp earth as the prison bus rattles toward Shawshank, its tires kicking up dust that stings your eyes. Andy's hands are cuffed, his suit once crisp, the kind you'd wear to clothes. A big deal now, rumpled, stained with sweat. He doesn't fidget or curse like the other new inmates. He just stares out the window, his face unreadable, like he's already calculating something nobody else can see. The bus jerks to a stop, and you're herded out with the others. Shawshank's gates tower above iron, and unyielding, the kind of entrance that swallows men whole. You hear the clang of metal, the shouts of guards barking orders. "Move it, fresh fish," one yells, his voice like gravel. The other prisoners' faces hardened by years inside line up to watch. You catch their eyes, some curious, some cruel, all betting on how long these newcomers will last. Andy steps forward, his shoulders square, and you can't help but notice the way he carries himself. Not cocky, but steady like a man who's decided he won't break no matter what's coming. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of mildew and despair. You follow Andy through the intake process where guards strip away what's left of his old life. They shave his head, the buzz of the clippers echoing off the concrete walls. His clothes are swapped for a gray prison uniform, stiff and scratchy, the number 37927 stamped across it. You see him flinch just for a second as the cold water from a delousing hose hits his skin. It's not the chill that gets him, it's the humiliation, the first real taste of what Shawshank does to a man. But Andy's eyes stay clear, focused, like he's already somewhere else. You're led down a corridor, the walls stained with years of neglect, the kind of place where hope feels like a bad joke. The other inmates shout from their cells, catcalls, threats, laughter that's more menacing than merry. Fresh fish, they chant, and you feel the weight of their stares. Andy doesn't react, doesn't even glance their way. You wonder what's going through his head. Is he scared, angry? Or is he already planning something, turning the gears of a mind that's sharper than the bars around him? You're not sure, but there's something about him that makes you want to keep watching. The guards march you to the cell block, boots echoing like gunshots. You pass rows of cages, each holding a man who's forgotten what the world smells like. Andy's cell is small, barely wider than his shoulders, with a cot, a sink, and a bucket that passes for a toilet. The bars slam shut behind him, the sound finale like the closing of a book. You're standing just outside, close enough to hear his breath, steady and slow. Most guys would be pacing, muttering, maybe crying. Not Andy. He sits on the cot, hands resting on his knees, and stares at the wall. You notice a flicker in his eyes, not fear, but something else. Defiance, maybe. Or hope, though that seems impossible in a place like this. You settle into the rhythm of the moment. The distant drip of a leaky pipe, the low hum of voices from other cells. It's late, and the lights dim, casting long shadows across the floor. You're still with Andy, watching, as he lies back on the cot, hands behind his head. The mattress is thin, the springs creaking under his weight, but he doesn't toss or turn. You can almost hear the thoughts in his head turning over like pages in a ledger. Outside, a guard's flashlight sweeps the corridor, the beam cutting through the dark. You catch a glimpse of Andy's face, calm, but not resigned. He's not like the others you think. There's something different about him, something that Shawshank hasn't touched yet. The night stretches on, and you're still there feeling the weight of the stone walls, the press of time that moves slower inside. You imagine the world beyond, cars with chrome fins, diners serving coffee for a nickel, kids playing stickball in the streets. But here it's just you and Andy, locked in a place that feels like it was built to crush spirits. You lean closer, catching the faint sound of his breathing, steady as ever. It's like he's telling you without words that he's not done yet, that this is just the beginning. And somehow you believe him. You shift your focus, letting the details sink in, the scratch of the wool blanket against Andy's skin, the faint metallic tang in the air, the way the moonlight barely sneaks through the tiny barred window. It's a world of hard edges and harder truths, but Andy's presence softens it just a little. You're not sure how he does it, but you're hooked, drawn into his story like it's your own. You think about the road ahead, the years that'll test him, the men he'll meet, the plans he might be forming even now. And you smile just a bit, because if anyone's going to outsmart a place like Shawshank, it's probably this guy. Bet he'd make a hell of a poker player, you think, chuckling to yourself. You're still there as the first night fades, the darkness giving way to a gray dawn that doesn't feel much brighter. Andy hasn't moved, hasn't spoken, but you feel like you know him already. Not his past, not his secrets, but the core of him, the part that's still free, no matter how many locks they put on the door. You're ready to see what happens next, to walk this path with him through the dirt and the dreams, and whatever else Shawshank throws his way. The story's just getting started, and you're all in. You're back in Shawshank, the air still heavy with that mix of damp stone and faded dreams. It's Andy Dufresne's first full day inside, and you're right there with him, feeling the weight of this place settle into your bones. The morning bell clangs sharp and unforgiving, ripping through the quiet like a blade. You hear the groan of men stirring in their cells, the shuffle of feet on cold concrete. Andy's already up, sitting on the edge of his cot, his prison uniform hanging loose on his frame. His eyes are steady, like he's bracing for whatever this day will throw at him. You can't help but admire that quiet resolve. It's not loud or showy, but it's there like a fire banked low but still burning. The cell doors grind open, and you follow Andy into the flow of inmates heading to the mess hall. The corridor smells of stale sweat and cheap disinfectant, the kind that never quite masks the rot underneath. You notice the way the other prisoners move, some with purpose, others dragging their feet already beaten down by the years. Andy walks with a measured step, not rushing, not lagging, just present. You catch a few guys sizing him up, their glances sharp like wolves sniffing out weakness. But Andy doesn't flinch, doesn't lower his gaze. You think to yourself, this guy's either got nerves of steel or he's just too stubborn to show he's scared. Maybe both. In the mess hall, the air is thick with the clatter of trays and the low hum of voices. You're standing near Andy as he grabs a tin plate, the metal scratched and dented from years of use. The food's a grayish slop oatmeal maybe, or something pretending to be. It smells like wet cardboard, and you see a flicker of distaste cross Andy's face before he smooths it away. He finds a spot at a long table, sitting alone for now, his back straight. You notice the other inmates watching him some, whispering, others smirking. New guy's got that banker look, one mutters his voice, carrying just enough for you to hear. You chuckle quietly, guess even in here a suit leaves a mark. You're taking in the scene, the harsh fluorescent lights, the guards leaning against the walls with their clubs at the ready, when a group of inmates slides onto the bench across from Andy. They're led by a guy with a scar running down his cheek, his grin more threat than welcome. You feel the tension shift like the air before a storm. "Heard you're some hotshot banker Scarface," says leaning forward. "Bet you're real good at counting other people's money." His buddies laugh, but it's not friendly. Andy meets his gaze calm as ever and says, "I'm just here to do my time." His voice is low, even not a hint of fear. You're impressed. Most guys would have stammered or looked away. Not Andy. The moment passes and Scarface backs off, but you know it's not over. You're still with Andy as he eats each bite deliberate, like he's forcing himself to stay grounded. You can almost taste the oatmeal yourself, gritty, tasteless, sticking to the roof of your mouth. The mess hall buzzes around you, a mix of shouts, laughter, and the occasional clink of a spoon against a tray. You notice Andy's hands steady as he grips the spoon, no tremor, no hesitation. It's like he's already decided this place won't own him, even if it's only day one. You move with him through the rest of the morning out to the prison yard, where the sun barely cuts through the gray sky. The yard's a sprawl of cracked concrete surrounded by high walls topped with barbed wire. You feel the openness. But it's a lie. There's no freedom here, just a bigger cage. Inmates cluster in groups, some lifting weights, others playing cards on makeshift tables. You hear the slap of a basketball against the ground, the low murmur of deals being made in the shadows. Andy stands off to the side, taking it all in. You're close enough to catch the faint tightening of his jaw, the way his eyes scan the yard like he's mapping it out. He's not just watching, he's learning. You notice a man approaching, older, with a lean build and a face that's seen too many years of this place. His name's Red, though you don't know that yet. He's got a quiet authority, the kind that comes from surviving Shawshank without losing your soul. He nods at Andy, a small gesture almost invisible. "Tough first day, huh?" Red says, his voice rough, but not unkind. Andy glances at him, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I've had better," he replies, and you catch the dry humor in it. Red chuckles, and you feel like you're witnessing the start of something, maybe not a friendship yet, but a spark. You think if anyone's going to get through to Andy, it's probably this guy. Bet he's seen it all. The day drags on, and you're there as Andy navigates the routine work in the laundry, where the air's thick with steam and the smell of cheap soap. Roll call, where guards bark names like they're spitting bullets. And back to the cell block, where the walls seem to close in tighter each hour. You feel the grind of it, the way Shawshank strips time down to its rawest form. Minutes that feel like days. Days that feel like years. But Andy moves through it with that same steady calm, like he's playing a long game nobody else can see. You're starting to get it. Now this isn't just a man surviving. This is a man who's already thinking beyond the bars. You're back in Andy's cell as night falls, the lights dimming to a dull glow. The air's cooler now, carrying the faint scent of rain from somewhere far off. You're close enough to hear the creak of the cot as Andy sits, his hands clasped, his gaze fixed on the wall. You wonder what he sees there, not just the cracked concrete, but something else, something he's holding on to. You feel the weight of the day, the way it's tested him, but you also feel his strength, quiet and unshakable. It's like he's telling you, without saying a word, that he's not done yet. That Shawshank might own his body, but it'll never own his mind. You linger in the moment, letting the details sink in the distant cough of another inmate, the soft scrape of a guard's boot down the hall, the way the shadows stretch across the floor like fingers reaching for Andy. You're hooked, drawn deeper into his story, into the man who's already starting to stand out in a place designed to make everyone the same. You smile to yourself, thinking about that poker face of his. Guy's probably got a royal flush hidden somewhere, you reckon, and you're ready to see him play it. You're still in Shawshank, the days starting to blur into one another, but today something shifts. You're out in the prison yard, the air sharp with the bite of early spring, and you're watching Andy Dufresne. He's leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets, his eyes scanning the crowd with that quiet focus you're starting to recognize. The yard's alive with the usual hum guys lifting weights, tossing a baseball, or just pacing to burn off the restlessness. You feel the grit of the concrete under your feet, the faint warmth of the sun fighting through the clouds. It's here in this fenced-in slice of nowhere that you see Andy and Red cross paths again, and it feels like the story's about to deepen. You notice Red moving through the yard, his walk easy but deliberate, like a man who knows every inch of this place. He's got a reputation, you've picked up on that by now. Red's the guy who can get you things, whether it's cigarettes, a deck of cards, or something harder to come by. He spots Andy and heads over, a faint smirk on his face. You're close enough to hear the gravel in his voice as he says, "You holdin' up?" Banker Andy looks at him, his expression calm, but with a spark of something, maybe amusement. "Well enough," he says, his tone dry. You grin to yourself. These two are like a couple of old dogs circling each other, figuring out if they're going to be friends or just nod and move on. Red leans against the wall beside Andy, pulling a cigarette from his pocket. He lights it, the match flaring briefly, and the smell of tobacco drifts your way. You catch the way Andy glances at the cigarette, not with want, but like he's noting every detail. "You don't talk much, do you?" Red says, blowing out a stream of smoke. Andy shrugs a small movement, not much to say yet. Red chuckles low and rough, and you feel the ease between them like a door cracking open. You're thinking this is it, the start of something that'll carry them both through this hellhole. Bet Red's already wondering what Andy's deal is. You're still watching as they talk, their voices blending with the sounds of the yard, the clink of weights, the distant shout of a guard. Red's asking about the outside, probing a little, but Andy keeps it short, deflecting with that polite calm of his. You can tell Red's intrigued, though. Most guys in here spill their guts or clam up out of fear, but Andy's different. He's got this stillness, like a lake with depths you can't see. You're drawn to it just like Red is, and you're starting to feel the pull of their connection, the way it's going to shape everything that comes next. The conversation shifts when Andy asks Red about something unexpected, a rock hammer. You raise an eyebrow, caught off guard. A rock hammer. In a place like this, Red looks at Andy like he's trying to figure out if he's crazy or just messing with him. "What's a banker need with a rock hammer?" Red asks, his tone half joking, half curious. Andy's answer is simple. "I like geology. Keeps me busy." You're not sure if you buy it, and neither does Red, but there's a glint in Andy's eye that makes you wonder. You're thinking this guy's got layers, and that hammer's probably more than it seems. Like he's already playing chess while everyone else is stuck on checkers. You follow them as they wrap up Red, promising to see what he can do about the hammer. The deal's struck quiet and quick, no fuss. You feel the weight of it, though not the hammer itself, but what it represents. Andy's not just passing time. He's got a plan, or at least the start of one. You're hooked, wanting to see where this goes, how a guy like Andy keeps his head above water in a place designed to drown him. The yard's still buzzing, but you're zeroed in on Andy, watching as he walks away, his steps as steady as ever. You move with him through the rest of the day back to the laundry, where the machines rumble like thunderstorms, the air thick with steam that clings to your skin. You see Andy working his hands, moving with precision folding sheets, pressing uniforms. The other inmates grunt and curse through the heat, but Andy's focused like he's solving a puzzle in his head. You catch a guard watching him, eyes narrowed like he's trying to figure out why this new guy doesn't act broken. You smirk a little. Good luck with that, pal. Andy's not the type to crack under a stare. You're there when the day winds down, the prisoners filing back to their cells. The corridors dim, the walls seeming to lean in closer with every step. You hear the clank of bars, the low murmur of voices settling into the night. Andy's back in his cell, sitting on his cot, his hands resting on his knees. You're close enough to see the faint lines of tension in his face, the ones he hides so well in the yard. He's human, after all, and Shawshank's starting to press on him. But then he leans back, exhales, and you see that spark again, the one that says he's not giving up. You linger in the cell, the air cool, now carrying the faint scent of rust and old paint. You hear the distant drip of a pipe, the soft creak of the cot as Andy shifts. You're starting to feel the rhythm of this place, the way it tries to grind you down, but also the way Andy resists it, quiet and stubborn. You're thinking about that rock hammer, about Red, about the way Andy's already carving out a space for himself in this gray world. You chuckle softly, guy's probably got a whole blueprint in his head, and you're ready to see him start building. You're deep in the rhythm of Shawshank now, the days grinding along like the slow turn of a heavy wheel. It's been a few weeks since Andy arrived, and you're with him as he settles into the prison's unrelenting routine. The air carries the same stale mix of sweat and concrete, but you're starting to notice the small ways Andy navigates this place, always observant, always composed, like he's memorizing the cracks in the system. Today, you're walking with him through the daily grind, feeling the weight of Shawshank's structure, but also sensing something new. Andy's beginning to find his footing, and you're here to see how he does it. Morning starts with the same harsh bell ripping you out of the quiet. You're in Andy's cell as he rises, his movements deliberate, almost mechanical. The cot creaks under him, and you catch the faint scent of mildew clinging to the walls. He pulls on his uniform number 37927, already starting to fade, and you notice his hand steady as ever, but with a few new calluses from the laundry work. You're thinking this place marks you fast, but Andy's still got that look in his eyes like he's holding on to something Shawshank can't touch. You're curious to see how he carries that through the day. You follow him to the mess hall where the air's thick with the clatter of trays and the low buzz of voices. The food's no better, some kind of watery stew today smelling like it was scraped from the bottom of a barrel. You see Andy take his tray, his face giving nothing away as he spoons the slop. He's sitting with a few guys now, not quite friends yet, but men who've started to nod at him in the yard. You catch their names, Haywood, Floyd, guys with rough edges, but no real malice. They're talking about nothing serious, just the usual prison chatter, a fight in the East Block, a guard who's been extra hard on the night shift. Andy listens, says little, but you can tell he's taking it all in, filing it away. You smirk, guys like a sponge, soaking up the place without making a splash. Out in the yard later, you feel the sun weak but warm, cutting through the gray. The yard's the same as always, guys lifting weights, playing cards, or just walking in circles to keep sane. You're with Andy as he leans against the wall, his spot now where he can see everything. Red's there too, tossing a baseball back and forth with another inmate. You notice the easy way Red moves like he owns this patch of concrete. He glances at Andy, tosses him the ball. "You play, Red?" asks his voice casual but testing. Andy catches it, tosses it back with a smooth motion. "Used to," he says, and there's a hint of a smile. You feel the moment light, but real, like a bridge being built. You're thinking these two are going to be tight and it's going to matter. You're still in the yard when you notice a group of inmates watching Andy, not friendly, not hostile, just curious. Word's getting around about the banker who doesn't act like he's broken. You catch a whisper from one of them guys too calm. Gotta be hiding something. You chuckle quietly, let him guess. Andy's not hiding, fear that's for sure. If anything, he's hiding a plan and you're starting to wonder just how deep it goes. You remember that rock hammer he asked Red for still not delivered, and you feel an itch of anticipation. What's he going to do with it? carve rocks, like he said. Or something else. The day rolls on and you're with Andy in the laundry, where the air's a wall of steam and the machines roar like angry beasts. You feel the heat on your skin, the way it makes your clothes stick. Andy's at a press ironing uniforms, his hands moving with that same precision you've come to expect. The other inmates grumble, sweat dripping down their faces, but Andy's focused almost like he's somewhere else. You catch a guard, Hadley, watching him from the doorway. Hadley's a big guy, mean as a snake, and you feel the tension as his eyes linger on Andy. You're thinking that's trouble waiting to happen, but Andy doesn't look up, doesn't give Hadley the satisfaction of a reaction. Smart move, you're there when the shift ends, the men filing out their shoulders slumped from the work. Andy's still steady, though you notice a slight tightness in his jaw, the only sign this place is wearing on him. You follow him to the cell block, the corridor dim and echoing with the clank of bars. Back in his cell, he sits on his cot, hands resting on his knees, and you're close enough to hear his breath slow and even. You feel the quiet of the night settling in the distant sounds of the prison, fading the cough of an inmate, the scrape of a guard's boot. You're starting to get the shape of Andy's days, the way he's carving out a space in this chaos piece by piece. You linger, taking in the details, the faint glow of a light down the hall, the coolness of the air now that the day's heat has faded. You're thinking about Red, about that baseball toss, about the way Andy's starting to fit into this world without losing himself. You feel the pull of his story, the way it's drawing you in, and you're ready to see what's next. You chuckle softly, imagining Andy out in the yard catching that ball, like he's still got a piece of the outside world in him. Guy's probably dreaming of a cold beer and a game on the radio, you think, and you're right there with him waiting for the next move. You're still locked into Shawshank's unyielding rhythm, the days piling up like stones in a wall. It's been a few months now, and you're walking alongside Andy Dufresne as he faces a new kind of challenge. The air in the prison feels heavier today, charged with a tension you can't quite place. You're starting to know Andy's ways, the calm in his step, the way his eyes catch everything, but there's a shadow creeping in, a threat that's been circling him like a vulture. Today, you're about to see what happens when that threat gets too close and how Andy handles it. Morning kicks off with the usual clang of the bell, sharp enough to rattle your teeth. You're in Andy's cell as he gets up, the cot creaking under him. The air's damp, carrying the faint smell of rust and old concrete. His uniform's worn in now, the gray fabric softer but stained with laundry work. You notice his hands tougher, marked by the grind, but still steady. He's been keeping his head down, doing his time, but you've seen the way certain eyes follow him in the yard. The sisters, they call themselves a pack, led by Boggs Diamond, all sharp grins and bad intentions. You've felt their stares before, but today something's different. You're thinking trouble's coming, and Andy's right in its path. You follow him to the mess hall, where the air's thick with the clink of trays and the low hum of voices. The food's a watery soup, flecked with something that might be potato smelling like it sat too long in a tin can. Andy takes his tray, sits with Haywood and Floyd, and you notice he's quieter than usual, his eyes flicking toward the door. You catch Boggs and his crew at another table, their laughter too loud, their glances too pointed. You feel the knot in your gut tighten. Andy's on their radar, and in a place like this that's never good. You're thinking he's got to know it too, but that calm face of his doesn't crack. Out in the yard, the sun's struggling through a haze of clouds, casting a dull light over the concrete. You're with Andy as he leans against his usual spot by the wall, Red nearby, tossing a baseball with another guy. The yard's alive, weights, clanging cards, shuffling voices, rising and falling. You're watching Andy when you see Boggs, and two of his guys peel off from the crowd moving toward him with a purpose that makes your skin crawl. Red notices too, his toss slowing, his eyes narrowing. You're close enough to hear Boggs's voice low and oily as he stops in front of Andy. "You're a real pretty one banker," he says, his grin like a blade. You feel the air shift heavy with threat. Andy meets Boggs' gaze, his face still, not a flicker of fear. "I'm not interested," he says, his voice low but firm, like he's stating a fact. You're impressed, but you're also tense. Guys like Boggs don't take no lightly. Boggs steps closer. His buddy's flanking him, and you hear the menace in his laugh. "You don't get a say in here," he says, and you feel the danger spiking like a storm about to break. Red's watching his jaw tight, but he doesn't move, not yet. You're thinking Andy's got to play this careful, or it's going to get ugly fast. Bet he's wishing he had that rock hammer in his hand right now. You think, a grim chuckle in your head. The moment stretches taut as a wire until a guard's shout from across the yard breaks it. "Break it up!" The guard barks, and Boggs backs off, but not before leaning in close to Andy, whispering something you can't hear, but can feel like poison. Andy doesn't flinch, just holds Boggs' stare until the sisters slink away. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding, but you know this isn't over. You're with Andy as he exhales slow, and controlled, his hands unclenching. Red walks over, tossing the baseball in his hand. "You okay?" he asks, his voice quiet. Andy nods a faint smile. "For now," he says, and you catch the steel in his tone. You're thinking this guy's not just surviving, he's fighting in his own way. You move with Andy through the day back to the laundry, where the steam's thick enough to choke on the machines, rumbling like a heartbeat. He's at his press ironing uniforms, his movements precise despite the heat. You notice the way he keeps his back to the wall now, his eyes scanning the room without seeming to. The other inmates work around him, some throwing him glances, some wary, some respectful. Words spreading about the yard about how Andy faced down Boggs and didn't blink. You smirk, guys building a rep without even trying. Later in the cell block, the night's settling in the air cooler, carrying the faint tang of metal. You're in Andy's cell as he sits on his cot, his hands resting on his knees. You're close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the first real sign that today got to him. But then he leans back, exhales, and you see that spark in his eyes, the one that says, he's not done. You hear the distant clank of bars, the low murmur of voices fading into the dark. You're feeling the weight of Shawshank, the way it presses on everyone, but also the way Andy's holding his ground, quiet and stubborn. You linger, taking in the details, the dim glow of a light down the hall, the soft creak of the cot, the way the shadows seem to hover around Andy like they're trying to figure him out. You're thinking about Boggs, about Red, about the rock hammer that's still out there somewhere. You feel the pull of Andy's story, the way it's gripping you, and you're ready for what's next. You chuckle softly, imagining Andy staring down Boggs like he's just another bad hand in a poker game. Guy's got guts, you think, and you're right there with him waiting to see how he plays the next card. You're still deep in Shawshank's gray grip, the months stacking up like the stone walls around you. It's 1949 now, and you're walking with Andy Dufresne as he faces a moment that shifts the tide. The air's warm today, heavy with the promise of summer, and you're out on the prison roof where a rare work detail has the inmates tarring under a blazing sun. You've seen Andy hold his own against the sisters, keep his cool with Red, but today you're about to see him pull off something that makes him more than just another inmate. This is where he starts to shine, and you're right there to witness it. The day starts like any other, with the bell's harsh clang pulling you into the mess hall. You're with Andy as he grabs his tray, some lumpy oatmeal, smelling faintly of glue. He's sitting with Red Haywood and Floyd now, a loose crew that's starting to feel like his people. You notice the way they lean in when he talks, which isn't often, but when he does, it lands. Today, he's quieter, his eyes distant like he's turning something over in his head. You catch Red watching him, a faint smirk on his face. "What's cookin', banker?" Red asks, tossing a piece of bread on his tray. Andy just smiles small and cryptic. "You'll see," he says, and you're thinking, oh, this guy's got something up his sleeve. Bet it's a good one. You're out on the roof by mid-morning, the sun beating down the air thick with the sharp, acrid smell of hot tar. You feel the heat radiating off the buckets the way it makes your skin prickle. The crew's small Andy, Red, Haywood, Floyd, a few others spreading tar under the watchful eyes of Captain Hadley and a couple of guards. Hadley's in a foul mood, griping about a tax problem with some inheritance money. You hear him cursing, his voice carrying over the slop of tar brushes. "Damn, government's gonna take half," he snarls, spitting on the ground. The other inmates keep their heads down, but you notice. Andy paws his brush, still his eyes sharpening. You're thinking, here it comes, whatever he's been cooking up. You're close enough to hear Andy's voice low and steady as he steps toward Hadley. "You know, I could help with that," he says, casual but clear. The roof goes quiet. The other inmates freezing, brushes dripping tar. Hadley turns his face a mix of disbelief and menace. "You talking to me, convict?" he growls. You feel the tension spike like a match struck in a gas-filled room. But Andy doesn't back down. "I used to handle taxes for a living," he says, his tone even like he's offering to fix a leaky faucet. "I can make sure you keep most of that money, legally." You're stunned. Guy's got balls talking to Hadley like that. You glance at Red, who's watching with a mix of worry and amusement, like he's waiting to see if Andy's about to get a club to the head or pull off a miracle. Hadley stares at Andy, his eyes narrowing, but you can see the gears turning. "What's the catch?" he asks, his voice gruff but curious. Andy shrugs, wiping tar from his hands. "No catch. Just need a few beers for my friends here, 3 each, cold ones." You almost laugh, beers in Shawshank. But Andy's dead serious, and you feel the audacity of it. The sheer nerve. Hadley hesitates, then barks a laugh, sharp and mean. "You got a deal, banker," he says. And you feel the air shift like a storm passing. You're thinking, holy hell, he did it. Andy just turned a tax gripe into a win, and you're grinning like you're one of the crew. You're there as the day rolls on the tar work continuing under the sun's relentless glare. You feel the stickiness of the tar, the way it clings to your shoes, the heat making your head throb. The other inmates keep stealing glances at Andy, their faces a mix of awe and disbelief. Red's shaking his head, muttering, "Crazy son of a gun." You catch Andy's eye, and there's a flicker of satisfaction there, not smug, just content. He's still spreading tar, his movements steady, but you can tell he's riding a quiet high. You're thinking this guy's not just playing the game, he's rewriting the rules. Later, you're with the crew as the guards deliver the beers, cold bottles sweating in the heat. You hear the clink of glass, the soft hiss as caps pop off. The inmates gather on the roof's edge, sitting like they're at a backyard barbecue, not a prison. You feel, the moment, the rare lightness of it, the way the beer tastes crisp and clean, cutting through the tar's bitterness. Andy's off to the side, not drinking, just watching the others with a faint smile. Red hands him a bottle, but Andy shakes his head. "I don't drink much," he says, and you catch the truth in it. He's savoring something else, something bigger. You're thinking he didn't do this for the beer. He did it to prove he could. You're back in the cell block as night falls, the air cooler now carrying the faint scent of rain on the wind. You're in Andy's cell as he sits on his cot, his hands clasped his face, calm but alive with that spark you've come to know. You hear the distant clank of bars, the soft murmur of voices settling into the dark. You're feeling the weight of what happened today, the way Andy turned Hadley's anger into a win, the way he gave the crew a taste of freedom, even if it was just a few sips. You're hooked, drawn deeper into his story, and you're ready for what's next. You chuckle softly, imagining Andy on that roof pulling off the impossible like it's just another day. Guy's got a knack for making the impossible real, you think, and you're right there with him waiting for the next play. You're still in Shawshank, the year's starting to creep by, and it's 1951 now. The prison's as unyielding as ever, but you're walking with Andy Dufresne, who's carving out something new in this gray world. The air's cool today, with a hint of fall, and you're about to see Andy take another step toward leaving his mark. He's been dodging the sisters earning respect with that rooftop beer stunt and building a quiet bond with Red. Now you're with him as he turns his eyes to the prison library, a dusty corner of forgotten books, and starts dreaming bigger. This is where Andy's vision starts to take shape, and you're right there to see it spark. The day begins with the usual bell sharp and grating, pulling you into the mess hall. You're with Andy as he grabs his tray some grayish eggs smelling faintly of sulfur. He's sitting with Red Haywood and Floyd, the crew that's become his anchor. You notice the way they talk now easier, like Andy's one of them, though. He's still got that quiet edge. Today, he's got a different energy, his eyes brighter, like he's holding on to an idea. Red picks up on it, leaning back with a grin. "What's got you all fired up, banker?" he asks, tossing a crust of bread on his tray. Andy's smile is small, but real. "Just thinking about books," he says, and you catch Red's raised eyebrow. You're thinking books in this place. But with Andy, you know there's more to it. You follow him to the library later, a cramped room tucked away in the prison's belly. The air's thick with the musty smell of old paper, and you feel the dust tickle your nose. The shelves are sparse, holding a handful of tattered novels, some outdated magazines, and a few moldy textbooks. You see Andy standing in the middle, hands on his hips, taking it all in like he's sizing up a challenge. An old inmate, Brooks Hatlin, runs the place, gray-haired, gentle, with eyes that carry decades of Shawshank's weight. You hear Brooks's soft voice as he shuffles over. "Need something, Andy?" he asks, curious but tired. Andy nods, his voice steady. "I'm thinking this place could be more," he says, and you feel the ambition in his words, quiet but bold. You're with Andy as he starts poking around, pulling books from the shelves, flipping through pages yellowed by time. You notice the way his fingers linger on a copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, his eyes narrowing like he's seeing something beyond the words. You're thinking that's no coincidence, escape, revenge, redemption. Sounds like Andy's kind of story. He talks to Brooks about what the library could be, a real resource, a place for inmates to learn to dream. Brooks listens skeptical, but intrigued, his hands fidgeting with a frayed bookmark. You feel the spark of possibility, the way Andy's planting a seed in this forgotten corner. You're thinking this guy's not just passing time, he's building something. You're there when Andy starts writing letters, sitting at a rickety table in the library, a stubby pencil in his hand. He's reaching out to the state, asking for funds to expand the library. Bookshelves, maybe even a record player. You hear the scratch of the pencil on paper, the faint creak of the chair as he shifts. The other inmates passing through glance at him, some smirking, some shaking their heads. "Wasting your time," Dufresne, one mutters. But Andy doesn't look up. You feel his focus like a laser cutting through the prison's haze. You're thinking most guys would have given up by the first letter, but not Andy. Bet he's already picturing a whole damn library in his head. You move with him through the day back to the laundry, where the steam's as brutal as ever, the machines roaring like they're alive. Andy's at his press ironing uniforms, his hands moving with that familiar precision. You notice he's got a new kind of calm now, like the library ideas given him a purpose. The other inmates work around him, their grumbles blending with the hum of the machines, but you catch Red watching Andy from across the room, a faint smile on his face. You're thinking Red sees it too. This guy's different, and it's starting to rub off. Later, you're in the yard, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the concrete. Andy's leaning against the wall, talking to Red about the library. You hear Red's voice, skeptical but warm. "You really think the state's gonna send you books?" he asks, tossing a baseball in his hand. Andy's answer is simple: "Won't know till I try." You feel the weight of that, the quiet defiance in it. Red chuckles, shaking his head. "You're a stubborn one," he says, and you grin. Damn right he is. You're thinking, if anyone can pull this off, it's Andy, and you're ready to see him try. You're back in Andy's cell as night settles in the air, cool, carrying the faint scent of damp stone. He's sitting on his cot, a small stack of paper beside him, more letters half written. You're close enough to hear his breath slow and steady, and you see that spark in his eyes, brighter now. You hear the distant clank of bars, the soft murmur of voices fading into the dark. You're feeling the pull of Andy's dream, the way it's starting to take root in this barren place. You chuckle softly, imagining him turning that dusty library into something real, like he's rebuilding a piece of the world. Guy's got a vision, you think, and you're right there with him, waiting to see it grow. You're still in Shawshank, the years rolling on, and it's 1954 now. The prison's stone walls feel as eternal as ever, but you're with Andy Dufresne, who's quietly reshaping this place in ways no one expected. The air's crisp today, carrying the sharp edge of early winter, and you're about to see Andy take another stand, not with fists, but with something just as bold. He's been building the library, dodging the sisters, and growing tighter with Red. Now you're with him as he claims a small piece of freedom, not just for himself, but for every man in Shawshank. This is where he hangs his first poster, and you're right there to feel the weight of it. The day starts with the usual bell, a harsh jolt that cuts through the morning quiet. You're in Andy's cell as he rises, the cot creaking under him. The air's cold smelling of damp concrete and the faint tang of rust. His uniform's faded, the number 37927, barely legible, but his hands are steady, marked by years of work. You notice something new today, a small package tucked under his cot, wrapped in plain brown paper. You catch a glimpse of Red's handwriting on it, and you know. This is the rock hammer Andy asked for, finally delivered. But there's something else in his eyes, a quiet excitement, like he's holding on to a secret. You're thinking, what's he up to now? Bet it's more than just rocks. You follow him to the mess hall, where the air's thick with the clatter of trays and the low hum of voices. The food's a watery porridge, smelling like it was boiled too long, but Andy eats without complaint, sitting with Red Haywood and Floyd. You notice the way the crew's grown, comfortable, their banter easy, though Andy's still the quiet one. Red's watching him, sensing that spark. "You look like a guy with a plan," Red says, leaning back with a grin. Andy's smile is small, almost sly. "Just rearranging my cell," he says, and Red chuckles, not quite buying it. "You're thinking rearranging, huh?" Sounds like Andy's version of shaking things up. You're with him later in his cell, the door open, during a rare inspection-free afternoon. The air's still the corridor quiet except for the distant echo of boots. Andy's unwrapping the package, and you see it, a small rock hammer, no bigger than a ruler, its handle worn but solid. He turns it over in his hands, his fingers tracing the metal, and you feel the weight of it, not just as a tool but as a symbol. Then he pulls out something else, a rolled-up poster, the edges slightly creased. You catch a glimpse of Rita Hayworth, her smile bold and bright, from Gilda. You raise an eyebrow, Rita, in Shawshank. But Andy's already moving, tacking the poster to the wall above his cot. You feel the defiance in it, small but real, like he's claiming a piece of the outside world. You're close enough to hear the soft tap of the tack going and the faint rustle of the paper as Andy steps back to look at it. The poster's a splash of color in the gray cell, Rita's eyes seeming to challenge the bars themselves. You notice the way Andy's shoulders relax just a fraction, like this one act has lightened the weight of the place. You're thinking it's not just a poster, it's a middle finger to Shawshank, a way of saying he's still his own man. You catch a faint smile on his face and you're hooked, wanting to know how this fits into the bigger picture. Bet he's already thinking 10 steps ahead, you think, chuckling to yourself. You move with him through the day back to the library where he's still writing letters, the stack of replies growing slowly but steadily. The air's musty, the shelves a bit fuller now, dog-eared novels, a few textbooks, even some records donated by a local church. You see Andy sorting books with Brooks, his hands careful like he's handling something precious. Brooks is warmer now, his skepticism softening as Andy's vision takes hold. You hear their quiet talk, Andy suggesting ways to organize the space, Brooks nodding along. You feel the slow build of something real, a corner of Shawshank that's starting to feel human. You're thinking this guy's turning dust into hope, one book at a time. Later, you're in the yard. The sky, a flat gray. The air sharp enough to sting your cheeks. Andy's leaning against the wall talking to Red about the poster. Red's grinning, tossing a baseball in his hand. Rita Hayworth. Huh, you got taste, I'll give you that. He says, his voice warm with amusement. Andy shrugs his eyes, glinting. Figured my cell needed some class, he says, and you catch the dry humor in it. Red laughs, shaking his head. You're a strange one, Dufresne, he says, but you can tell he respects it. You're thinking that poster's more than class. It's Andy staking a claim, and you're ready to see what else he's got planned. You're back in Andy's cell as night falls, the air cold, now carrying the faint scent of frost through the barred window. He's sitting on his cot, the poster glowing faintly in the dim light, Rita's smile a quiet rebellion. You're close enough to hear his breath slow and steady, and you see that spark in his eyes burning brighter. You hear the distant clank of bars, the soft murmur of voices fading into the dark. You're feeling the weight of what Andy's doing, building a library, hanging a poster, holding on to himself in a place that wants to strip him bare. You chuckle, softly imagining him staring at Rita like she's a promise of something better. Guy's got a fire in him, you think, and you're right there with him, waiting to see it burn. You're still in Shawshank, the years pressing on, and it's 1955 now. The prison's walls are as cold and unyielding as ever, but you're with Andy Dufresne, who's been quietly bending this place to his will. The air's warm today, heavy with the thick humidity of late summer, and you're about to witness a moment that lights up Shawshank like nothing else. Andy's been building the library, defying the sisters, and keeping that Rita Hayworth poster as his quiet rebellion. Now, you're with him, as he pulls off something daring, filling the prison with music that feels like freedom itself. This is Andy at his boldest, and you're right there to hear it. The day kicks off with the usual bell, a harsh clang that drags you into the mess hall. You're with Andy as he grabs his tray some soggy pancakes, smelling faintly of grease and regret. He's sitting with Red Haywood Floyd and the crew their table, a pocket of camaraderie in the gray din. You notice Andy's got a spark today, his eyes sharp, like he's holding a secret that's about to burst. Red senses it, leaning forward with a grin. You look like trouble waiting to happen, he says, tossing a crust of bread on his tray. Andy's smile is small, almost mischievous. Just feeling musical, he says, and Red raises an eyebrow. You're thinking musical in this dump. But with Andy, you know it's going to be something big. You follow him to the library later, where the air's thick with the smell of old books and fresh ink. The shelves are fuller now thanks to Andy's letters, rows of novels, history books, even a few records stacked in a corner. You see him sorting through a new donation, his hands careful as he pulls out a record, Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro. You catch the way his fingers linger on the sleeve, his eyes softening like he's touching a piece of the world he left behind. Brooks is there shuffling papers, and you hear his soft voice. "Nice find, Andy," he says. But Andy's already moving, heading for the prison's PA system in the warden's office, where he's been helping with paperwork. You're thinking, oh, he's got a plan, and it's going to shake this place up. You're with him as he slips into the office, the air cooler smelling of polished wood and stale coffee. The PA system's there, a clunky box of wires and switches usually used for guard announcements. You see Andy glance at the door, making sure he's alone, then lock it with a soft click. Your heart's racing now because this is risky. Messing with the warden's setup is a one-way ticket to trouble. He sets the record on the turntable, his hands steady, and you hear the needle drop, the faint crackle before the music starts. Then it hits Mozart's soaring notes, bright and alive, spilling through the PA into every corner of Shawshank. You feel it like a jolt, like sunlight breaking through the gray. You're out in the yard now, the music pouring over the concrete, stopping every man in his tracks. You see inmates freeze weights, dropped cards, forgotten heads turning toward the speakers. The guards are caught off guard, their shouts drowned out by the aria's rise. You feel the air shift heavy with something new, hope maybe, or just the shock of beauty in a place that's forgotten it. Red's standing near you. His face, soft eyes, distant like he's remembering something he thought was gone. You're thinking this is Andy's doing, and it's like he's cracked open the sky. Bet every guy here feels like they're breathing free air for the first time in years. You're back with Andy in the office watching as he leans against the desk, eyes closed, letting the music wash over him. You see the peace on his face rare and unguarded, like he's somewhere else, maybe a concert hall, maybe a life before Shawshank. But the door rattles, and you hear the guards banging their voices, sharp with anger. "Dufresne, open this damn door," one yells, and you feel the tension spike. Andy doesn't move, just turns up the volume, the music swelling louder, defiant. You're stunned, guy's not just playing a record, he's making a stand. You're thinking he knows what's coming, but he's doing it anyway, and you're right. There, caught in the thrill of it. The guards break in, and you're with Andy as they drag him out the music, cutting off with a screech. You feel the roughness of their hands, the way Andy stays calm, even as they shove him toward solitary. The yard's quiet now, the inmates watching, some with awe, some with worry. Red's there, shaking his head, but smiling like he can't believe Andy pulled it off. You hear whispers that was Dufresne, and you know this moment's gonna stick a story they'll tell for years. You're thinking Andy just gave them something no one can take away, and it's worth whatever punishment's coming. You're in Andy's cell later after 2 weeks in the hole. The air's cool, the night settling in with the faint scent of damp stone. He's back thinner, his face a little drawn, but that spark's still there, burning steady. You're close enough to hear his breath slow, and even as he sits on his cot, Rita Hayworth's poster glowing faintly above him. You hear the distant clank of bars, the soft murmur of voices fading into the dark. You're feeling the weight of what he did, filling Shawshank with music, giving every man a taste of something bigger. You chuckle softly, imagining him in that office, Mozart, blasting like a battle cry. Guy's got a heart like steel, you think, and you're right there with him waiting for his next move. You're still in Shawshank, the years grinding on, and it's 1957 now. The prison's walls are as unforgiving as ever, but you're with Andy Dufresne, who's been quietly rewriting what this place can be. The air's heavy today, thick with the damp chill of early spring, and you're about to witness a moment that cuts deep. Andy's been building the library, defying the odds with that Mozart stunt, and keeping his spark alive under Rita Hayworth's watchful gaze. Now you're with him, as the library faces a heartbreaking loss with Brooks Hatlin's departure, and you're right there to feel the weight of it. The day starts with the usual bell, a sharp clang that drags you into the mess hall. You're with Andy, as he grabs his tray, some lumpy oatmeal smelling faintly of mildew. He's sitting with Red Haywood and Floyd, the crew that's become his family, but you notice a shadow over the table today. Andy's quieter. his eyes distant like he's carrying something heavy. Red picks up on it, leaning back with a frown. "What's eating you, banker?" he asks, tossing a spoon on his tray. Andy's voice is low, almost a whisper. "Brooks got his parole," he says, and you feel the words land like a stone. You're thinking parole's supposed to be good news, but the way Andy says it, it sounds like a sentence. You follow him to the library later, where the air's thick with the smell of old books and wood polish. The shelves are fuller now, rows of novels, textbooks, and records a testament to Andy's relentless letters. But the room feels empty without Brooks, who's been the library's heart for decades. You see Andy sorting books, his hands slower than usual, his eyes lingering on Brooks' old desk, where a half-finished crossword still sits. You hear the creak of the floor as Andy moves the faint rustle of pages, and you feel the absence like a missing note in a song. You're thinking Brooks was more than a librarian. He was a piece of this place, and now he's gone. You're with Andy as he tells the crew about Brooks's parole in the yard, the sky a dull gray, the air damp against your skin, the concrete's cold under your feet, and you hear the usual sounds, weights clanging, voices muttering, but it's muted like the news has dampened everything. Red's tossing a baseball, his face grim. "Old man's been here 50 years, he says, his voice rough. "World out there ain't his anymore." Andy nods his eyes on the horizon beyond the barbed wire. You catch a flicker of worry in his face, rare and raw, and you realize he's not just thinking about Brooks, he's thinking about what Shawshank does to a man's soul. You're thinking this place doesn't just lock you up, it steals your place in the world. You're there when Andy visits Brooks in his cell, helping him pack his few belongings, a worn Bible, a couple of books, a photo of a long-gone family. The air's stale smelling of old cloth and dust. You hear Brooks's voice shaky but trying to sound brave. "I don't know what I'll do out there," he says, his hands trembling as he folds a shirt. Andy's steady, his voice calm. "You'll find your way, Brooks," he says, but you catch the strain in his eyes like he knows it's not that simple. You feel the weight of the moment, the way Brooks is clinging to the only home he knows, even if it's a cage. You're thinking Shawshank's got its claws in deep and letting go hurts worse than staying. You move with Andy through the day back to the library where he's alone now, sorting through a new batch of donated books. You see him pause, holding a copy of Warden, his fingers tracing the cover like it's a lifeline. You feel his thoughts heavy with Brooks' fate, and you know he's wondering if this place will break him the same way. But then he sets the book down, straightens his shoulders, and you see that spark flicker back to life. You're thinking Andy's not Brooks. He's got a fight in him, and he's not done yet. But he's already planning how to keep the library alive even without its old keeper. Later, you're in the yard, the sun sinking, casting long shadows across the concrete. Andy's leaning against the wall, talking to Red about Brooks. You hear Red's voice, low and somber. "Some guys, they get so used to these walls, the outside's what kills them," he says, tossing the baseball in his hand. Andy's quiet, his eyes on the ground, but then he looks up, his voice firm. "Then we keep fighting to make this place worth something," he says, and you feel the resolve in it like a vow. You're thinking that's Andy turning loss into purpose, one stubborn step at a time. You're back in Andy's cell as night falls. The air cold now, carrying the faint scent of rain through the barred window. He's sitting on his cot, Rita Hayworth's poster, glowing faintly above him, her smile a quiet defiance. You're close enough to hear his breath slow and steady, and you see that spark in his eyes, tempered but burning. You hear the distant clank of bars, the soft murmur of voices fading into the dark. You're feeling the weight of Brooks' departure, the way it's shaken Andy, but also steeled him. You chuckle softly, imagining him in the library keeping Brooks' legacy alive like it's a promise. Guy's got a heart that won't quit, you think, and you're right there with him, waiting for what's next. You're still in Shawshank, the years piling up, and it's 1963 now. The prison's walls are as relentless as ever, but you're with Andy Dufresne, who's been quietly turning this place into something more than a cage. The air's warm today, thick with the haze of late summer, and you're about to see Andy's influence grow in ways that ripple through the prison. He's been building the library, defying the odds with that Mozart stunt, and keeping his spark alive under Rita Hayworth's watchful gaze. Now you're with him as he takes on new responsibilities, helping guards and inmates alike, and you're right there to feel the quiet power he's carving out. The day starts with the usual bell, a harsh clang that pulls you into the mess hall. You're with Andy as he grabs his tray, some watery eggs smelling faintly of grease and regret. He's sitting with Red Haywood and Floyd, the crew that's become his backbone. You notice the way they lean in now, not just out of habit, but respect. Andy's different today. His eyes sharp but calm, like he's balancing a dozen thoughts at once. Red catches it, tossing a crust of bread on his tray. "You look like a man with too many jobs," he says, grinning. Andy's smile is small, steady. "Keeps me busy," he says, and you feel the weight behind it. You're thinking, busy's an understatement. Guy's practically running half the prison's paperwork. You follow him to the warden's office later, where the air's cooler, smelling of ink and polished wood. Andy's been working here more handling financial records for Warden Norton, a man with cold eyes and a colder heart. You see Andy at a desk, his hands moving over ledgers with that banker's precision numbers lining up like soldiers. You hear the scratch of his pen, the faint creak of the chair, and you feel the tension in the room. Norton's watching from the doorway, his gaze sharp like he's weighing Andy's worth. You're thinking this is dangerous ground working for a man like Norton, but Andy's calm, his focus unbroken. Bet he's already 3 steps ahead, you think, a quiet chuckle in your head. You're with him as he shifts gears, heading to the library where the air's thick with the smell of books and fresh paint. The shelves are packed now. Novels, textbooks, records, all thanks to Andy's relentless letters. You see inmates browsing, some reading, others studying for high school diplomas. Andy's helped set up. You hear the soft murmur of voices, the rustle of pages, and you feel the life in this place like a heartbeat. Andy's coaxed out of the stone. He's helping a young inmate with math today, his voice patient, breaking down fractions like it's the most natural thing. You're thinking this guy's not just building a library, he's building futures one lesson at a time. You're there when Andy meets with Captain Hadley in the guardroom, the air heavy with cigarette smoke and the faint tang of whiskey. Hadley's got another financial mess, some rental properties, taxes eating him alive. You see Andy lean back, his voice steady, offering advice like he's back in a boardroom. Set up a trust move, the income through it. He says simple but sharp. Hadley grunts impressed despite himself, and you feel the shift. Andy's not just a convict to these guys anymore. He's useful. You're thinking that's power in a place like this, but it's a tightrope, and Andy's walking it like a pro. You move with him through the day back to the yard where the sun's dipping low, casting long shadows across the concrete. The air's cooler, now carrying the faint scent of dust and sweat. Andy's leaning against the wall, talking to Red about the work he's doing, guards, inmates, even Norton. You hear Red's voice low and wary. "You're playing with fire, getting cozy with the warden," he says, tossing a baseball in his hand. Andy's eyes are steady, his voice firm. "It's not about cozy, it's about leverage," he says, and you feel the steel in it, the way he's turning Shawshank's rules to his advantage. You're thinking leverage, huh? Guy's building an empire out of nothing but brains and guts. You're in the library again later, watching Andy sort through a new batch of records, his hands careful as he stacks them. You see a flicker of pride in his eyes, rare and quiet, as he looks around at what he's built. You hear an inmate thank him for a book, another for help with a letter home, and you feel the respect he's earned not with noise but with action. You're thinking this is Andy's real rebellion, not just surviving but making Shawshank better inch by inch. Bet he's got half the prison owing him favors by now, you think, smirking to yourself. You're back in Andy's cell as night settles in the air, cool, carrying the faint scent of rain through the barred window. He's sitting on his cot, Rita Hayworth's poster, glowing faintly above him, her smile a quiet anchor. You're close enough to hear his breath slow and steady, and you see that spark in his eyes burning brighter despite the years. You hear the distant clank of bars, the soft murmur of voices fading into the dark. You're feeling the weight of Andy's growing influence, the way he's reshaping this place without raising his voice. You chuckle softly, imagining him balancing ledgers and lives like it's all part of the same plan. Guy's got a mind like a chessboard, you think, and you're right there with him, waiting for his next move. You're still in Shawshank, the years rolling on, and it's 1965 now. The prison's walls are as cold and unyielding as ever, but you're with Andy Dufresne, who's been quietly reshaping this place with his mind and his will. The air's crisp today, carrying the sharp bite of early fall, and you're about to meet a new face, Tommy Williams, a young inmate whose arrival stirs up hope and danger. Andy's been building the library, outsmarting the sisters, and working the system with Norton and the guards. Now you're with him, as Tommy's story brings a truth that could change everything, and you're right there to feel the spark it ignites. The day starts with the usual bell, a grating clang that drags you into the mess hall. You're with Andy as he grabs his tray, some grayish oatmeal smelling faintly of damp cardboard. He's sitting with Red Haywood and Floyd, the crew that's become his family, their banter a steady rhythm in the gray din. You notice Andy's calm today, but there's a quiet intensity in his eyes, like he's always ready for the next move. Red catches it, tossing a spoon on his tray, grinning. You ever get tired of being the smartest guy in the room, he asks. Andy's smile is small, dry. Haven't found that room yet, he says, and you chuckle. Guy's got a wit as sharp as his mind. You're thinking something's coming, and Andy's going to be ready for it. You're in the yard, later, the sun weak but warm, cutting through the chill. The concrete's gritty under your feet, and you hear the usual hum weights, clanging cards, shuffling voices rising and falling. You see a new guy, young, maybe mid-20s, with a cocky grin and a bounce in his step. That's Tommy Williams, fresh in from another prison, already making waves with his loud laugh and quick talk. You notice Andy watching him from his spot by the wall, his eyes narrowing, not suspicious but curious. Red's there too, tossing a baseball. Kid's got a mouth on him, Red says, nodding toward Tommy. Andy's voice is low. Might have a story too, he says, and you feel the weight of his words. You're thinking, Andy's got a knack for spotting what matters. You're with Andy when he meets Tommy in the library, the air thick with the smell of books and fresh ink. The shelves are packed now, novels, textbooks, records, a living testament to Andy's work. Tommy's there flipping through a comic book, his energy restless, like he's itching to move. You hear Andy's voice calm and steady as he offers to help Tommy study for his high school diploma. You don't seem like the type to sit still, Andy says, a faint smile in his tone. Tommy grins, leaning back. Yeah, well, I ain't dumb, just unlucky, he says, and you feel the spark between them, like Andy's found someone worth investing in. You're thinking this kid's gonna shake things up, and Andy's already seeing it. You're there when Tommy starts opening up, sitting with Andy and the crew in the yard a few days later. The air's cooler now, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves. You hear Tommy's voice rough but eager as he tells stories about his time on the outside, petty thefts, bar fights, and a stretch in another prison. Then he drops something big casual, like it's just another tale, a cellmate who bragged about killing a banker's wife and her lover, pinning it on the banker. You see Andy freeze his face still, but his eyes sharp, like a hawk locking onto prey. "What was his name?" Andy asks, his voice low, controlled. Tommy shrugs. "Some guy named Elmo Blatch." You feel the air shift heavy with possibility. You're thinking, holy hell, that's Andy's case. This could be his ticket out. You're with Andy as he processes this back in the library, his hands gripping a book he's not reading. You see the storm in his eyes, the way hope and fear collide. He's been in Shawshank for nearly 2 decades, and now there's a slim, dangerous chance that he could prove his innocence. You hear the faint creak of the chair as he shifts the soft rustle of pages, and you feel the weight of what this means. You're thinking this is huge, but in a place like this, truth can be more dangerous than lies. Bet Andy's already weighing the risks. You think your heart racing with the stakes. You move with him through the day back to the warden's office where he's still handling Norton's books. The air's tense smelling of ink and Norton's cheap cologne. You see Andy's hands move over the ledgers, steady as ever, but you catch a flicker of distraction, like Tommy's story is burning in his mind. Norton's there, his cold eyes scanning Andy, and you feel the danger. Norton's not the type to let a useful man walk free. You're thinking Andy's got to play this smarter, he's walking into a trap. You're in the yard later, watching him talk to Red, his voice low, recounting Tommy's story. Red's face is grim, his voice rough. "You tell Norton you're a dead man," he says, tossing the baseball. Andy's quiet, but you see the steel in his eyes. You're thinking he's not backing down, not now. You're back in Andy's cell as night falls, the air cold, carrying the faint scent of frost through the barred window. He's sitting on his cot, Rita Hayworth's poster, glowing faintly above him, her smile a quiet anchor. You're close enough to hear his breath slow but heavy, and you see that spark in his eyes burning with a new intensity. You hear the distant clank of bars, the soft murmur of voices fading into the dark. You're feeling the weight of Tommy's arrival, the way it's cracked open a door Andy thought was locked forever. You chuckle softly, imagining him piecing together this puzzle, ready to fight for his truth. Guy's got a fire that won't quit, you think, and you're right there with him, waiting for the next step. You're still in Shawshank, the years weighing heavy, and it's late 1965 now. The prison's walls are as cold as ever, but you're with Andy Dufresne, who's been fighting to hold on to hope in a place built to crush it. The air's sharp today, laced with the bitter chill of early winter, and you're about to see that hope tested like never before. Andy's been building the library, outsmarting the sisters and carrying the weight of Tommy's revelation, a truth that could free him. Now you're with him as he faces Warden Norton with that truth, and you're right there to feel the fire and the danger of it. The day starts with the usual bell, a harsh clang that cuts through the morning dark. You're with Andy as he grabs his tray in the mess hall, some watery porridge smelling faintly of stale grain. He's sitting with Red Haywood and Floyd, but the table's quieter today, the air thick with unspoken tension. You notice Andy's eyes sharp but shadowed, like he's carrying a storm inside. Red senses it, leaning forward, his voice low. "You sure about this, Andy?" he asks, tossing a spoon on his tray. Andy's nod is small, his voice steady but heavy. "Gotta try," he says, and you feel the resolve like a man walking toward a cliff. You're thinking this is it, he's going for broke and it's gonna cost him. You follow him to the warden's office, louder, the air cool and sharp with the smell of ink, and Norton's cheap cologne. Andy's there working on ledgers as usual, his hands moving with that banker's precision. But you see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes flick to Norton, who's standing by the window, his face a mask of cold control. You hear the scratch of Andy's pen, the faint creak of the chair, and you feel the weight of what's coming. Andy clears his throat, his voice calm but firm. "Sir, I've got something to tell you," he says, and you feel the air tighten like a rope pulled taut. You're thinking, here it comes, and it's going to shake everything. You're with Andy as he lays out Tommy's story. Elmo Blatch, the man who bragged about killing Andy's wife and her lover, pinning it on the banker. You see Norton's face still at first, then hardening, his eyes narrowing like a predator's. "You expect me to believe this," Norton says, his voice low. "Dangerous?" Andy doesn't flinch, his words measured. "It's the truth." Tommy's willing to testify. You feel the stakes spiking the way Norton's silence is louder than any shout. You're thinking Andy's playing a high-stakes game and Norton's not the type to lose. Bet he's wishing he kept this to himself, you think, your heart pounding. You're there when Norton leans forward, his voice icy. You're a convict Dufresne. Your word's worth nothing. You see Andy's jaw tighten just a fraction, but he pushes on, calm but unyielding. "I'm asking for a chance to prove it. Contact the authorities, let Tommy speak. The room's a pressure cooker now." And you feel the danger like a blade hovering over Andy's neck. Norton's smile is thin, cruel. "You're useful here, Dufresne. Don't make me regret that." You're thinking that's a threat plain as day, and Andy's walking a razor's edge. You see him nod polite but firm, and you know he's not backing down, not yet. You move with him through the day, back to the library, where the air's thick with the smell of books and fresh paint. You see Andy helping an inmate with a letter, his hand steady, but you catch the strain in his eyes like Tommy's truth is burning a hole in him. You hear the soft rustle of pages, the murmur of voices, and you feel the contrast, the library's warmth against the cold threat of Norton's words. You're thinking Andy's built something real here, but Norton's got the power to tear it down. You're in the yard, later, watching him talk to Red, his voice low, recounting the meeting. Red's face is grim, his voice rough. "You're poking a bear, Andy," he says, tossing a baseball. Andy's quiet, but you see the fire in his eyes. You're thinking he's not given up even if it's suicide. You're with Andy when he's called back to Norton's office that evening, the air heavy with the scent of polished wood and menace. Norton's there, his face unreadable, but you feel the trap closing. "I've thought about your request." Norton says, his voice smooth but deadly. "We'll handle it." You see Andy's eyes narrow, sensing the lie, but he nods polite as ever. You're thinking Norton's not going to let this go. Tommy's in danger, and Andy knows it. You feel the weight of that knowledge, the way it's pressing on Andy's shoulders, but he's still standing tall. You're back in Andy's cell as night falls, the air cold, carrying the faint scent of frost through the barred window. He's sitting on his cot, Rita Hayworth's poster glowing faintly above him, her smile a quiet defiance against the dark. You're close enough to hear his breath slow but heavy, and you see that spark in his eyes, flickering but fierce. You hear the distant clank of bars, the soft murmur of voices fading into the dark. You're feeling the weight of Andy's fight, the way he's clinging to hope, even as Norton's shadow looms. You chuckle softly, imagining him staring down Norton like he's just another obstacle to outsmart. Guy's got a will like iron, you think, and you're right there with him waiting for the fallout. You're still in Shawshank, the weight of late 1965 pressing down like the cold stone walls around you. The air's bitter, now sharp with the sting of winter, and you're with Andy Dufresne as the hope sparked by Tommy's revelation turns to ash. The prison's as unforgiving as ever, but Andy's been fighting, building the library, outsmarting the sisters, and clinging to the truth that could free him. Now, you're about to witness a gut-punch moment that shakes him to his core. Tommy's fate is sealed, and you're right there to feel the darkness closing in. The day starts with the usual bell, a harsh clang, that slices through the morning gloom. You're with Andy in the mess hall, watching him grab his tray, some watery soup, smelling faintly of old potatoes. He's sitting with Red Haywood and Floyd, but the table's heavy with silence today, the air thick with dread. You notice Andy's eyes shadowed and tense like he's bracing for a blow. Red's watching him, his face grim, his voice low. "You hear anything from Norton?" he asks, stirring his spoon without eating. Andy shakes his head, his voice tight. "Not yet," he says, but you feel the fear behind it, like he knows something's wrong. You're thinking Norton's playing dirty and Andy's caught in the crosshairs. You're in the yard later, the sky a flat gray, the air cold enough to bite your skin. The concrete's slick with frost, and you hear the usual sounds, weights, clanging, voices muttering, but there's a hush, like the prison's holding its breath. You see Andy leaning against the wall, his spot, but he's distracted, his eyes scanning for Tommy. You notice the kid's absence, and it hits you. Tommy hasn't been around all morning. Red's there, tossing a baseball, his face etched with worry. "Kid's probably in solitary," he says, but his voice lacks conviction. Andy's quiet, his jaw tight, and you feel the knot in your gut tighten. You're thinking this ain't right. Tommy's story was too dangerous, and Norton's not the type to let it slide. You're with Andy when the news breaks late in the day in the library. The air's thick with the smell of books and wax, but it feels stifling now, like the walls are closing in. Red comes in his face, ashen, his voice low and rough. "Tommy's gone," he says, and you see Andy freeze his hands, gripping a book so hard his knuckles whiten. "Gone," how Andy asks, his voice steady but barely holding. Red's eyes drop, his words heavy. "Shot. Last night. Guards said he was trying to escape." You feel the air sucked out of the room, the truth hitting like a fist. Norton had Tommy killed to bury the truth about Andy's case. You're thinking that bastard Tommy was just a kid, and Norton snuffed him out like a candle. You're close enough to see the storm in Andy's eyes, the way grief and rage collide. He sets the book down, slow, like he's trying not to break something. But you feel the tremor in his hands, the crack in his calm. You hear the faint creak of the floor, the soft rustle of pages, and you know this is a wound that cuts deep. You're thinking Andy trusted that truth, believed it could free him, and now it's cost Tommy's life. You're in the yard later, watching him stand alone, his breath visible in the cold air, his eyes distant. Red approaches, his voice soft. "I'm sorry, Andy," he says, but Andy just nods, his face unreadable. You're thinking he's hurting, but he's not broken, not yet. You move with him through the day back to the warden's office, where the air's heavy with the scent of ink and Norton's smug presence. Andy's working on ledgers, his hands moving mechanically, but you see the strain in his face, the way he avoids Norton's gaze. Norton's there, his voice smooth, almost cheerful. "Tragic about young Williams," he says, and you feel the lie like a slap. Andy's silent, his pen scratching, but you know he's screaming inside. You're thinking Norton's daring him to react, but Andy's too smart for that. He's biding his time even now. Bet he's got a plan brewing. You think your heart heavy but hopeful. You're in the library again, watching Andy sort records, his hands slower, like the weight of Tommy's death is dragging him down. You see an inmate thank him for a book, but Andy's response is quiet, distracted, and you feel the shift he's still helping, still building, but there's a darkness, now a shadow over his spark. You hear the soft murmur of voices, the rustle of pages, and you know the library's still alive, but it's haunted by Tommy's absence. You're thinking Andy's carrying this loss like a stone, but he's not letting it crush him. You're in his cell later, the air cold, carrying the faint scent of frost through the barred window. He's sitting on his cot, Rita Hayworth's poster glowing faintly above him, her smile a quiet rebellion against the grief. You're close enough to hear his breath slow and heavy, and you see that spark in his eyes dimmed but stubborn, fighting to stay lit. You hear the distant clank of bars, the soft murmur of voices fading into the dark. You're feeling the weight of Tommy's fate, the way it's shattered Andy's hope, but not his will. You chuckle softly a grim sound, imagining Andy staring at that poster drawing strength from it, like it's a lifeline. Guy's got a soul that won't quit, you think, and you're right there with him, waiting for him to rise from this. You're still in Shawshank, the winter of 1965, dragging on, and the prison's walls feel tighter than ever, like they're squeezing the life out of everything. The air's raw, heavy, with the damp cold of January, and you're with Andy Dufresne as he sinks into his darkest moment. Tommy's death has left a scar, a brutal reminder that hope can be a dangerous thing in a place like this. Andy's been building the library, outsmarting the system, and carrying the weight of a truth that cost a life. Now, you're with him as despair creeps in, threatening to break the man who's held strong for nearly 2 decades, and you're right there to feel the depth of it. The day starts with the usual bell, a grating clang that feels like it's mocking the gray dawn. You're with Andy in the mess hall, watching him grab his tray, some watery gruel, smelling faintly of sour milk. He's sitting with Red Haywood and Floyd, but the table's a ghost town of silence. The crew's eyes avoiding Andy's like they're afraid to see what's there. You notice his face drawn and pale, his eyes hollow, like the spark that's carried him is flickering out. Red tries to break the quiet, his voice low. "You gotta eat, Andy," he says, pushing a spoon toward him. Andy's response is a faint nod, his hand still, and you feel the weight of his grief heavy as the stone around you. You're thinking this ain't the Andy. We know he's slipping, and it's hard to watch. You're in the library later, where the air's thick with the smell of books and old wood, but it feels lifeless today, like Tommy's absence has drained it. You see Andy sorting papers, his movements slow, mechanical, like he's just going through the motions. The shelves are packed, novels, textbooks, records, but you notice the dust gathering on Brooke's old desk, a reminder of losses piling up. You hear the faint creak of the floor, the soft rustle of pages, and you feel the emptiness like the library's heart is beating weaker. You're thinking this was Andy's sanctuary, but now it's a mirror of his pain reflecting everything he's lost. Bet he's wondering if it's all been for nothing. You think your chest tight. You're with him in the warden's office, the air sharp with the scent of ink and Norton's smug presence. Andy's working on ledgers, his hands moving over numbers, but you see the tremble in his fingers, the way his eyes don't focus. Norton's there, his voice smooth, dripping with false concern. "You've been quiet, Dufresne," he says, leaning back in his chair. "Hope you're not dwelling on that Williams nonsense." You feel the venom in his words, the way he's twisting the knife. Andy's silent, his pen scratching, but you know Tommy's death is a wound that's still bleeding. You're thinking Norton's enjoying this, watching Andy break, but Andy's still here, still fighting, even if it's just to breathe. You're in the yard later, the sky, a dull steel, the air cold enough to burn your lungs. The concrete's slick with ice, and you hear the muted sounds, Waits, clanging voices low, like the prison's mourning too. Andy's alone, not at his usual spot, just standing near the fence, his breath visible, his eyes fixed on nothing. You see Red, watching from a distance, his face etched with worry, but he doesn't approach like he knows Andy needs space. You feel the isolation, the way Andy's pulling inward, carrying Tommy's death like a chain. You're thinking this is the lowest he's been, and you're scared that spark might go out for good. You move with him through the day back to the library where he's helping an inmate with a letter, his voice flat, his hands unsteady. You see the inmate thank him, but Andy's response is a curt nod, and you feel the disconnect. He's here, but he's not lost in a fog of grief and guilt. You hear the soft murmur of voices, the rustle of pages, and you know the library's still alive, but Andy's barely holding on to it. You're thinking he's been the rock for everyone else, but now he's crumbling and it's tearing at you to see it. You're in his cell later, the air freezing, carrying the faint scent of snow through the barred window. He's sitting on his cot, Rita Hayworth's poster above him, her smile a cruel contrast to the darkness in his eyes. You're close enough to hear his breath shallow and uneven, and you see his hands clasped tight like he's holding himself together by force. You notice something new. A small rock on his cot, polished smooth maybe from that hammer he's been using. You feel the weight of it, a tiny piece of his old dream, now just a reminder of what's been lost. You hear the distant clank of bars, the soft murmur of voices fading into the dark, and you're feeling the depth of Andy's despair, the way it's pulling him under. You chuckle softly, a sad sound, imagining him staring at that rock, trying to find the man he used to be. Guy's got a heart that's taken too many hits, you think, but you're right there with him, hoping he'll find his way back. You're still in Shawshank, the winter of 1966, clawing at the prison with icy fingers, and the air's so cold it feels like it could snap. The walls are as merciless as ever, but you're with Andy Dufresne, who's been wrestling with despair after Tommy's death shattered his hope. The library, the music, the fight against the sisters, all of it's been tested, and Andy's been teetering on the edge. Now, you're about to witness the moment that changes everything. Andy's great escape, a plan so meticulous, it's been hidden in plain sight for years. You're right there to feel the shock and the brilliance of it. The day starts with the usual bell, a harsh clang that cuts through the pre-dawn dark like a blade. You're with Andy in the mess hall, watching him grab his tray some watery oatmeal, smelling faintly of damp grain. He's sitting with Red Haywood and Floyd, but you notice a shift today. Andy's eyes, once hollow, have a quiet intensity like a man who's made a decision. Red senses it, leaning forward, his voice low. "You look different, Andy," he says, stirring his spoon. Andy's smile is faint, almost secretive. "Just ready for a change," he says, and you feel the weight of those words like a door about to swing open. You're thinking, what's he got cooking? This ain't the broken man from yesterday. You're in the library later, where the air's thick with the smell of books and old polish, but it feels alive again, like Andy's presence is rekindling it. You see him sorting records, his hands steady, his movements deliberate. You notice a small stack of papers on the desk, neatly tied, like he's tying up loose ends. You hear the soft rustle of pages, the faint creak of the floor, and you feel a hum of purpose, like Andy's been planning something big. You're thinking this isn't just about the library, he's been working on something else, something hidden. But that rock hammer's more than a hobby, you think, your pulse quickening. You're with him in the warden's office, the air sharp, with the scent of ink and Norton's cheap cologne. Andy's working on ledgers, his hands moving over numbers, but you see a calmness in him like he's already somewhere else. Norton's there, his eyes cold, watching Andy like a hawk. "You've been productive, Dufresne," he says, his voice smooth but edged. Andy nods, polite as ever, but you catch a flicker in his eyes, a glint of defiance. You're thinking Norton's got no idea what's coming. Andy's playing a game so deep it's invisible. You feel the tension like a storm building, and you're hooked, waiting for the lightning. You're in the yard later, the sky a heavy gray, the air biting with frost. The concrete's slick, and you hear the usual hum weights clanging. Voices low, but Andy's different, standing at his spot by the wall, his breath visible, his eyes distant but focused. Red's there, tossing a baseball, his face curious. "You gonna tell me what's up?" he asks, his voice soft. Andy's voice is low, almost a whisper. "Hope's a good thing, Red, maybe the best." You feel the weight of it, the way he's handing Red a piece of his soul. You're thinking this is more than talk, Andy's got a plan, and it's about to unfold. You're with him that night in his cell, the air freezing, carrying the faint scent of snow through the barred window. You see him, sitting on his cot, Rita Hayworth's poster, glowing faintly above her smile, a quiet accomplice. You notice his hand steady, holding a small rope he's been braiding, nothing fancy but purposeful. You hear the distant clank of bars, the soft murmur of voices fading, and then it happens, the guards call for lights out. You're close enough to see Andy stand, his movements slow, deliberate as he pulls the poster aside. Behind it, a hole jagged man-sized, carved through the wall over years with that tiny rock hammer. You're stunned, your heart racing. This is it, the secret he's been hiding. You're with him as he crawls through the air, damp and gritty, the tunnel, narrow, smelling of earth and rot. You feel the scrape of concrete, the weight of the prison above, and you know he's been digging for nearly 2 decades, night after night, hiding the debris in the yard. You're thinking this is insane, guy's been chipping away at freedom while everyone slept. You follow him through the tunnel into a sewer pipe, the stench overwhelming the walls, slimy with filth. You hear the splash of his boots, the labored rhythm of his breath, as he crawls, inching toward the outside. You're thinking this is what hope looks like: grit, patience, and a will that won't break. You're there when he emerges, breaking through the pipe into a rain-soaked field, the storm raging, lightning cracking the sky. You feel the cold rain on his skin, the mud under his hands, as he stands free after 19 years. You see him tear off his prison shirt, arms raised, letting the rain wash away Shawshank's stain. You're thinking this is it? Andy beat the unbeatable, and it's like the world's new again. You're back in the prison the next morning, the air buzzing with shock, as the guards find his empty cell, the poster mocking them. You hear Norton's rage, Red's quiet awe, and you know this is a story they'll never forget. You're in Andy's cell, the air still, the poster now, a legend. You feel the weight of his escape, the way it's rewritten Shawshank's rules. You chuckle softly, imagining him, out there free, maybe laughing at the rain. Guy's got a spirit that nothing could cage you, think, and you're right there, waiting to see what's next. You're no longer in Shawshank's crushing grip, but the echo of its walls lingers as you shift to a new chapter in 1966. The air's warm, now carrying the salty tang of the ocean, and you're following the fallout of Andy Dufresne's impossible escape. The prison's reeling, and you're with Red and the others as Warden Norton faces the consequences of Andy's brilliance. Andy's out there somewhere free after 19 years, and you're about to see how his careful planning unravels Norton's corrupt empire. You're right there to feel the satisfaction of justice creeping in. The day starts in Shawshank the morning after Andy's escape, and the prison's buzzing like a kicked hive. You're in the mess hall where the air's thick with the smell of burnt toast and cheap coffee. The inmates are whispering their trays, untouched eyes darting to the guards who look rattled, their usual swagger gone. You're with Red Haywood and Floyd at their table, and you notice Red's face quiet, awe mixed with worry, like he's trying to believe Andy made it. Haywood's voice is low, excited. He crawled through a damn sewer, he says, shaking his head. Red's smile is small, his voice rough. That's Andy, stubborn as hell, he says, and you feel the pride in it like Andy's win is theirs too. You're thinking this place'll never be the same, and it feels good. You're in the warden's office, later, the air heavy with the scent of ink and panic. Norton's there, his face a mask of rage pacing as guards report the escape. You see the ledgers on the desk, the ones Andy kept so meticulously, now a ticking bomb. You hear Norton's voice, sharp and brittle. Find him, he snarls, but you catch the fear in his eyes. He knows Andy's too smart to be caught easily. You're thinking, Norton's built his kingdom on Andy's back, and now it's crumbling. You notice a package on the desk delivered that morning addressed to the local paper. You feel the weight of it, Andy's final move, and it's gonna hit hard. Bet he's smiling somewhere, you think your pulse quickening. You're with Red in the yard, the sky a dull gray, the air cool with the fading winter. The concrete's still slick from last night's rain, and you hear the hum of the prison waits, clanging voices buzzing with the escape. Red's leaning against the wall, tossing a baseball, his eyes distant. You hear him murmur, almost to himself, Zihuatanejo, the name Andy, mentioned a place that sounds like a dream. You feel the pull of it the way Andy's left a spark in Red, a hope he's not sure he can trust. You're thinking Andy's not just free, he's rewriting Red's story too, and you're hooked, wanting to see where it leads. You're there when the news breaks, days later in the library. The air's thick with the smell of books and fresh ink, and you see Red holding a newspaper, his hands shaking. The headline screams, "Corruption." Norton's been skimming money through fake contracts with Andy's ledgers as the proof. You hear the inmates whispering their voices, a mix of shock and glee, as guards rush to contain the chaos. You see Norton in his office, the walls closing in his face, pale as sirens wail outside. You feel the justice, sharp and sweet, as state officials arrive, their boots echoing in the halls. You're thinking Andy didn't just escape, he burned Norton's world down, and it's beautiful. You're with Norton as his empire collapses, the air heavy with the scent of his own fear. You see him alone, the ledgers, gone the package Andy sent exposing every dirty deal. You hear the creak of his chair, the faint tremble in his breath as he pulls a revolver from his drawer. You feel the finality, the way his corruption's caught up to him, and you're there when the shot rings out a single crack that ends his reign. You're thinking Andy didn't pull the trigger, but he might as well have guys a mastermind, and Norton never saw it coming. You're back in the yard days later with Red and the crew. The air's warmer, carrying a hint of spring, and you feel the shift. Shawshank's still a prison, but Norton's gone, and Andy's legend is alive in every whisper. You see Red, his face softer, holding a letter he's been writing, like Andy's escape has stirred something in him. You hear his voice low and steady. "Maybe there's something to hope for," he says, tossing the baseball. You feel the change, the way Andy's broken the prison spell, even for those still inside. You're thinking this is what Andy left behind, a crack in the walls, letting light in. You're in the library, the air alive again, as inmates sort through books Andy's system built. You see his legacy shelves packed, lives touched, a place that's more than stone. You hear the soft murmur of voices, the rustle of pages, and you know Andy's still here in every page, turned every lesson learned. You chuckle softly, imagining him out there maybe on a beach, knowing he beat Shawshank at its own game. Guy's got a soul that's unstoppable, you think, and you're right there, waiting for the next piece of his story. You're out of Shawshank's shadow, now moving into 1967, where the air feels lighter, carrying the promise of something new. The prison's still a grim memory, but you're with Red, who's stepping into a world he hasn't seen in 40 years. Andy's escape has left a mark. Norton's gone, the library thrives, and hope's taken root in Red's heart. Now you're following Red on his parole journey, a path fraught with uncertainty, but lit by Andy's influence. You're right there to feel the struggle and the pull of freedom. The day starts in a parole hearing room, the air stale with the smell of old wood and bureaucracy. You're with Red, sitting stiff in a cheap suit, his hands clasped to hide the tremor. The parole board's faces are stern, their voices flat, asking the same tired questions. "Do you feel rehabilitated?" one asks, barely looking up. You hear Red's voice rough but steady as he speaks from a place deeper than he's gone before. Rehabilitated. I don't know what that means anymore. I just want a chance to live quiet, to make good on a friend's hope. You feel the truth in it, the way Andy's escape has cracked open Red's cynicism. You're thinking this is different. He's not just saying what they want. He's saying what he believes. You're there when the board approves his parole, a stamp on a form that feels like a miracle. You see Red's face stunned, like he's not sure whether to trust it. You're with him. As he steps out of Shawshank's gates, the air warm, carrying the scent of grass and diesel. The world's loud cars, honking radios blaring, and you feel the overwhelm the way it hits Red like a wave. He's free, but freedom's a strange beast after 40 years of bars. You're thinking, this is what Andy meant by hope. It's scary as hell, but it's alive. Bet Red's wondering if he can keep up. You think your heart heavy, but hopeful. You're in Portland now, following Red to a halfway house, the air thick with the smell of cheap soap and boiled cabbage. You see him in a cramped room, a single bed, and a window that doesn't open wide enough. You hear the creak of the floor, the distant hum of a city he doesn't know. You notice his hands fidgeting with a harmonica. Andy once gave him a small piece of their friendship. You feel the weight of his days bagging groceries at a supermarket, the monotony echoing Shawshank's grind. You're thinking this ain't freedom, not yet. It's just a different cage, and Red's fighting to find his place. You're with him on the streets, the air sharp with the scent of rain and exhaust. You see him walking head down, avoiding the rush of people who don't know his story. You hear the clatter of a diner, the buzz of a neon sign, and you feel his isolation the way the world's moved on without him. You're there when he visits Brooke's old boarding house, standing in the room where the old man carved his name before taking his life. You see Red's face etched with fear, and you feel the pull of that same darkness, the temptation to give up. You're thinking this is where Brooks broke, but Red's got Andy's voice in his head whispering about Zihuatanejo. You're in the halfway house at night, the air cool, carrying the faint scent of damp plaster. You see Red sitting on his bed, holding a postcard, no writing. Just a picture of a Pacific beach sent by someone who doesn't need to sign his name. You feel the spark. It ignites the way it pulls Red back from the edge. You hear his breath slow and steady as he decides to keep going to chase the promise Andy left him. You're thinking this is what Andy gave him, not just a dream, but a reason to fight for it. Bet he's picturing that beach right now, you think a quiet smile forming. You're with Red as he navigates the day's small steps toward something better. You see him at the grocery store, his hands steadier, his nods to coworkers less forced. You hear the soft tune he plays on the harmonica, a melody that feels like Andy's hope woven into sound. You feel the shift the way Red's starting to see the world not as a threat, but as a challenge. You're thinking he's finding his way inch by inch, just like Andy did in Shawshank. You're there when he buys a bus ticket. The air sharp with the scent of ink and paper, his hands steady as he chooses a path toward Andy's dream. You're in Red's room, the air still, the night quiet except for the distant hum of the city. You see him packing a small bag, the harmonica tucked inside his face, calm but alive with purpose. You hear the creak of the floor, the soft rustle of fabric, and you know he's ready to leave this halfway life behind. You're feeling the weight of his journey, the way Andy's escape has given him a map to follow. You chuckle softly, imagining Red stepping off a bus looking for that beach ready to find his friend. Guy's got a heart that's learning to hope again, you think, and you're right there with him waiting for the road ahead. You're far from Shawshank now in the bright heat of 1967, where the air hums with the scent of wild grass and distant salt. You're with Red, who's left the halfway house behind chasing the promise Andy Dufresne planted in his heart. The world feels vast, almost too big after 40 years of walls, but Red's on a journey driven by hope and a friend's words. Now you're with him as he reaches a quiet field in Buxton, Maine, searching for the oak tree Andy described a step closer to Zihuatanejo. You're right there to feel the weight of this moment, the pull of a promise kept. The day starts on a dusty bus. the air thick with the smell of diesel and worn leather. You're with Red, his small bag on his lap, the harmonica tucked inside like a talisman. You see his hands steady but lined with years gripping the seat as the bus rattles through open country. You hear the low hum of the engine, the murmur of other passengers, and you feel his quiet determination like a man who's finally chosen to live. You're thinking, this is Red's escape not from prison, but from fear, and Andy's the one who gave him the map. Bet he's wondering what's waiting under that tree. You think your heart light, but tense. You're there when Red steps off the bus in Buxton, the air warm, carrying the sweet scent of hay and earth. The field's wide-rolling green under a blue sky, and you see Red pause, taking it in his eyes, scanning for the oak tree Andy told him about. You feel the openness, the way it's both freeing and daunting, like the world's daring him to keep going. You hear the rustle of grass under his boots, the distant call of a bird, and you know this is more than a search, it's a test of faith. You're thinking Andy's out there somewhere, and this tree's the bridge between them. You're with Red as he walks the field, the sun high, warming his shoulders through his thin jacket. You see him spot the oak massive and old, its branches spreading like a promise kept. You feel his pulse quicken the way hope and doubt tangle in his chest. You hear his breath steady but heavy as he approaches the stone wall nearby, just like Andy described. You're thinking, this is it, the moment Red finds out if Andy's dream was real or just a story to keep them going. You notice his hands careful but eager as he searches the ground looking for the black volcanic glass Andy mentioned. You're close enough to see the glint of obsidian, a small rock, unnatural in the grass marking the spot. You feel the rush as Red kneels, his fingers brushing dirt away, uncovering a tin box buried shallow. You hear the soft scrape of metal, the faint creak as he opens it, and you see the letter inside folded neat with cash and a note in Andy's precise handwriting. You feel the weight of it, the way it's more than paper. It's proof that Andy's alive waiting. You're thinking, damn, Andy did it. He left a lifeline and Red's holding it. Bet he's feeling like the world just got a little brighter. You think, a grin forming. You're with Red as he reads the letter, the air still the only sound, the rustle of leaves in the oak's branches. You hear Andy's words through Red's eyes. If you're reading this, you're out. Come to Zihuatanejo, you'll know the place. You feel the pull of it, the way it's not just an invitation, but a challenge to believe in something better. You see Red's face soft with awe, a tear he doesn't bother to hide. You're thinking, this is what Andy gave him a chance to live, not just survive. You're there when Red tucks the letter away, his hand steady as heart set on the Pacific. You're on the road with him, the air shifting as he boards another bus, this one heading south. You hear the hum of tires on pavement, the soft strum of a radio playing something hopeful. You see Red looking out the window, the fields giving way to towns, then mountains, his face calm but alive with purpose. You feel the journey, the way each mile is a step away from Shawshank's shadow and closer to Andy's dream. You're thinking Red's not just chasing a beach, he's chasing the man who showed him how to hope again. You're with him at a border crossing the air warm, carrying the scent of dust and freedom. His papers checked his path clear. You're in Red's quiet moments, the air soft with the promise of the sea. You see him clutching the letter, rereading it under a motel's dim light, his harmonica silent but close. You hear his breath slow, and even as he lets himself believe in Zihuatanejo and Andy, in a life beyond the walls. You're feeling the weight of this step, the way the oak tree was a turning point, a promise kept. You chuckle softly, imagining Red under that tree, holding Andy's letter like it's a ticket to a new world. Guy's got a soul that's found its way, you think, and you're right there with him waiting for the reunion. You're in Zihuatanejo, now, the sun blazing high in 1967, the air rich with the scent of salt and warm sand. Shawshank's a distant scar, and you're with Red as he nears the end of his journey chasing the dream Andy Dufresne planted years ago. The Pacific stretches endless before you, its waves a steady heartbeat, and you're about to witness the reunion that ties every struggle, every hope into something whole. Andy's out there a free man, and Red's steps are bringing them together. You're right there to feel the warmth of this moment, the culmination of their story. The day starts on a rickety bus winding through Mexico, the air thick with dust and the faint sweetness of tropical fruit. You're with Red, his small bag, clutched tight the harmonica inside a quiet reminder of Andy. You see his face lined but alive, his eyes scanning the horizon for the ocean Andy described. You hear the creak of the bus, the soft chatter of locals, and you feel Red's anticipation like a man who's finally close to something real. You're thinking, this is it. Red's almost there, and Andy's waiting. Bet he's wondering if this beach is as good as Andy promised you. Think your heart light with expectation. You're there when Red steps off the bus, the air warm, carrying the briny tang of the sea. The town's small, colorful buildings hugging the shore, and you see Red pause, taking in the turquoise waves, the palm trees swaying lazy in the breeze. You feel the freedom the way it washes over him, softer but stronger than anything he felt leaving Shawshank. You hear the crunch of sand under his boots, the distant call of gulls, and you know this is the place Zihuatanejo, the dream Andy held onto through 19 years of stone. You're thinking Red's made it, and it's like the world's finally keeping a promise. You're with Red as he walks the beach, the sun hot on his shoulders, the sand soft and giving. You see him scan the shoreline, his eyes narrowing against the glare, searching for a sign of Andy. You feel his pulse steady but quick, the mix of hope and fear that this might be another empty dream. You notice a small boat up ahead, weathered but sturdy, its hull gleaming under the sun. You hear the soft lap of waves, the creak of wood, and then you see him, Andy, sanding the boat. His shirt open, his face tanned and calm like he's always belonged here. You're thinking there he is, the man who beat Shawshank, and Red's about to close the circle. You're close enough to see Red stop his breath, catching his face, breaking into a smile that carries 40 years of weight. You feel the moment the way it's more than a reunion. It's a victory over every wall, every loss. You hear Andy's voice low and warm as he looks up. Red, he says, simple like they're picking up a conversation from yesterday. You see Red's nod, his eyes bright, and you hear his voice rough but steady. You look like you could use a hand with that boat. You feel the ease, the way their friendship slips back into place, unbroken by time or distance. You're thinking, this is what hope builds, something that lasts, something that shines. You're with them as they talk, the air soft with the scent of sea and wood. You see Andy gesture to the boat, explaining his plan, a small charter business taking folks fishing, living quiet by the water. You hear Red's laugh deep and real as he teases Andy about his sanding skills. You feel the lightness, the way they're free men now, not just from prison but from the shadows that followed. You're thinking this is what Andy saw in his cell under Rita Hayworth's smile, a life worth fighting for, and he's sharing it with Red. Bet they're both feeling like they've won something bigger than freedom. You think a quiet grin forming. You're there as the sun dips lower, painting the sky gold and pink, the waves catching the light like a promise. You see Andy and Red working on the boat, their hands moving together, sanding and laughing, the rhythm easy like they've done this forever. You hear the soft clink of tools, the murmur of their voices, and you know this is home, not just the beach, but the bond they've carried through hell. You're thinking Shawshank took everything it could, but it couldn't take this. You're with them as they pause, looking out at the Pacific, their faces calm, their eyes reflecting the endless blue. You're feeling the weight of this ending the way it's not just a reunion, but a testament to everything they've endured, Tommy's loss, Norton's cruelty, the years of Stone. You chuckle softly, imagining them on that boat tomorrow, fishing under the sun, living the dream Andy spun in a cell. Guys like them, they've got hearts that beat stronger than any wall you think, and you're right there, soaking in the peace of it. The sun's sinking now, the Pacific a mirror of fire and calm, and you're still here with Andy and Red on this quiet beach. The air's softer, the waves a gentle whisper carrying the scent of salt and freedom. You feel the warmth of the sand, the way it holds the day's heat grounding you in this moment. Their laughter's faded to a comfortable silence, the boat resting easy, a promise of tomorrow. You hear the distant cry of a gull, the slow rhythm of their breaths, and you know they've found something rare, a life, rebuilt a friendship unbroken. You're drifting. Now the world slowing, the colors of Zihuatanejo blending into a warm haze. The ocean's song is steady like a lullaby wrapping you in its calm. You see Andy's smile, Red's nod, and you feel the truth they've earned hope's worth the fight, worth the scars. The stars are peeking out faint against the twilight, and you're ready to let this story rest, knowing they're here together free. Let the waves carry you. Let the warmth hold you, and rest easy in the glow of their victory.